I love Legos. I always have and I always will. My obsession with them definitely started as a kid. Most people's probably did. Legos is one of the biggest franchises in the world, but the thing people like about them is what you can create with them. I've always had a very active imagination, so whenever I was growing up, I would always look for something that I could use to express that imagination. And Legos was just one of those things. But Lego Star Wars in particular is probably one of my favorites. Of course, as a kid, I had Legos. I remember putting them together. I remember my parents getting some of them for me. And a lot of kids probably do. A lot of kids can probably relate to that. But not even kids, adults. I mean, everybody usually starts young with Legos. Even though, obvious joking hazard, but Legos evolved, for me at least, and they started turning from a way to express my imagination into a strange collection. And I think a lot of people can say the same as well. Whenever I was younger, I used to get a set to keep it together for maybe a week and then rip it apart and never put it back together again, and use the pieces to create all sorts of different weird contraptions and, well, spur my imagination. But as I got older, I began to collect them. It all started after I broke my arm, and my mom felt bad because she didn't believe me, so we wound up just getting a brace for the first day, and then the day after we wound up realizing that it was completely broken, and so we had to go to the hospital and get a cast, and she felt bad, so she offered me $100 worth of Legos. And me being in 5th grade, I jumped at it, and I was very happy, and it made the whole thing a lot easier because I remembered after this I was going to get to build Legos, which I had not been able to do for a very long time because I hadn't been getting very many new sets, because I had kind of grown out of Legos. I got about 4 sets and I built them, but I didn't take them apart. I didn't even get rid of the boxes, which was very rare. Usually those would be the first things I would get rid of, but I stacked the boxes and I put them in my room, and I put the instructions in the box and all the spare pieces to make sure that if I lost any I could replace them. And I set them up in my room, and I let them collect dust, and over time I would get another set, and then maybe for my birthday I'd get another, and then Christmas, and eventually my collection just began to grow bigger and bigger and bigger. And it began to grow out of what it was originally meant for. Whenever I first got the sets, yes, I would still occasionally take them down, dust them off, play around with them, maybe take a piece or two off. I'll need to put it back on exactly where it was. But eventually I just stopped touching them, and I set them up almost like a display. I would memorize exactly where they were on the front of the box in the display, and I would put them exactly where they were, and try not to touch them. And this was almost a protective, nobody could touch these, not even me. Because I thought of them as more of a collection and a collector's item, and I didn't use them to express my imagination anymore. I had other things that I could use to express my imagination, but they were all online, and nothing really beat that physical touch. But then one of my friends convinced me to take down a set and to let us play with it during a sleepover, and then he convinced me to let another, and another, and another, and it was fun. I had fun again. We made up this whole story using all these Lego Star Wars sets that I had accumulated over the past 2 years, and we used the minifigures, and we had this extravagant story, and it had story arcs, and it had surprise turns and reveals, and it was almost like we were making a movie. And it was fun. I remember looking back at it in fond memories, but I also remember thinking at the time that, oh no, what if one of the pieces chips off and I never find it? He wound up convincing me to let us take pieces off, but not small pieces. I would have died if small pieces were taken off. We just wanted to make it look like the sets were destroyed because they were ships and they were attacked. So, we took a wing off, or a piece of the Millennium Falcon set that I had gotten for my birthday, and we put them right exactly below where they were supposed to be, and I had the instructions on top of them just in case I lost a piece or I misplaced it. And it turned out fine. But then we decided to do it again. And at this time, I forgot to put them back. So I left them out, and I lost multiple pieces. And it made me sad. I am not a very organized person. I had them out in my room, and I left them for about 3 days before I finally got around to cleaning them up, and over that time, my cats and my feet and other stray objects that were thrown into my room by my family began to knock them over or chip a piece off here and there, and I wound up struggling and stressing over how every single piece should go back exactly how it was. And whenever me and my friend decide to do it for a third time, only this time it wasn't just me and one of my friends, it was me and 2 of them. Now one friend is manageable, but 2, playing with hundreds of dollars worth of Lego sets that I valued, that I had spent precious time putting together, but they had spent no time at all with, is a recipe for disaster. And disaster struck whenever one of my friends kicked one of a piece, and we couldn't find it. And I immediately stepped at my friends, and we put all of the pieces back, pristinely as they were, only for them to not be touched again for a long time. And I feel like that defeats the purpose of Legos. If you don't play with Legos, then you don't truly understand them. Legos are supposed to be an extension of yourself, of your imagination. Build what you want, build what you see. There's so many games now. There is an entire category of games online where you can do whatever you want. You can basically be a god of your own little universe. And that's what Legos basically allowed for kids. Only instead of online, where it was untangible, Legos were more an extension of your imagination. And you could allow stories to be told in real time with real physical objects, where it is much harder to tell stories in sandbox games. Whenever we're a kid, everybody likes to think of themselves as a storyteller. I like to think of myself as a storyteller. but slowly I began to stop telling stories. And I feel like that's whenever childhood imagination ends and the adult version of it begins to creep in. Nostalgia, remembering those fun times. And I'm nowhere near being an adult, but I've always been a bit more mature than some of my friends, and it's been hard because I've always had my imagination, my storytelling, and like whenever I played with Legos, I hope that this channel turns into something for me to tell a story. One that will no longer just be in my head, but one that will also be in yours. Thank you for listening.